Welcome to Small Brand Mentality Listeners Club. This is episode number 2. Now, we're really excited to take the Substack community and break this out into an audiovisual platform as well to accompany these case studies. And we're going to talk to people in the industry, in this running and outdoor industry, who embody that mindset and outlook where they're here to build, break, disrupt, adapt, create, destroy, and repeat. And this week we are so fortunate to be joined by Katherine Burgess. You've undoubtedly known her work before. Now, in this particular episode, we'll go into Katie's origins and as a graphic designer and experiential marketer, in her origins, inspiration, development, into the work that you've seen in the running industry today. So you might have seen stuff with Brooks, Atalanta, Pittsburgh Track Club, HOKA, Adidas, Puma, Under Armour, Brooks. There's so many things that Katie has put her mark on. And this is just a great conversation where we get to learn more about the framing, the mindset, and the execution of what Katie does so well. So please enjoy and share with a friend while you're at it.
Well, thank you. That motivation's huge for me. This is exactly why I want to chat with you, because I respect your work whenever I see it. And it's always to the point where I'm like, that's a Katie project. I know what it looks and feels like. And I know how much effort, time, and just energy you put into everything you do. So this is kind of an opportunity for people to understand the process a little bit more. I love to start kind of in the background for you as well. I know you've done so many projects that are impactful in the running industry, in the outdoor industry, and it kind of starts, as the way I see it, from the combination of studying graphic design and you were running it at Cal U in Pennsylvania. So zooming out from that, backing out a little bit, when you were going into this graphic design program in Pennsylvania, what were the motivations at that time to go into that space?
So for anyone listening who doesn't know Cal U, it's California University of Pennsylvania. It's nothing in California. It's a small, tiny, local, affordable state school near where I grew up. It's about 25 minutes from my house that I grew up at. And my motivation for going there is I couldn't really afford anywhere else. I had an SAT score, I think, of 9, 10. I wasn't dumb. I just didn't have the best schooling, just grew up kind of rural. But there's an importance placed on education. And my parents didn't go to college. I grew up in a blue collar family. My dad was a coal miner. He was a welder and electrician for the mine and really valued training and education and getting trades. But for us, he was whenever he had twin daughters very young, he's you guys are going to go to college. And they kind of put a value on education. And it kind of makes me sad seeing so many brands nowadays, whenever they're talking about we're hiring, we want this and that, we value education. And it kind of seems like the value is placed on elite degrees. It's not the education itself, but where you went. Is it important enough kind of thing? Originally, I studied childhood education to be a science teacher and an English teacher for the halfway through my degree. Then start of junior year is when I finally switched to graphic design. The main reason being I kind of just didn't realize it was a career option. I really lucked out. I ran on the team and my coach, we had an incoming student coming in and I needed a roommate at the time. My roommate transferred, left. So he's like, oh, here, you could room with Jackie. She's a graphic design major. I think you'll like her, because my coach knew I was really artsy and loved to draw in my free time. So she's a year younger than me. She enters the program. She just was so amazing. So on top of it, had great time management skills, just really dedicated and smart, way smarter than I was. And I just kind of thought that was a weird person to go into the arts, an art degree. I really didn't know any of the art students at my school. I kind of believed the notion of the rural place where I grew up of being an artist, it's the starving artist syndrome kind of thing. You're messy and unproductive and lazy and you don't work hard. And you kind of just create pretty stuff that doesn't have any value or substance to the world, and thus you're never going to get hired for that and make money. And it felt a little bit not true, but I couldn't look at anywhere in my small town who was an artist except for our art teacher. She was awesome. Actually, speaking of the fellowship that you mentioned before, I got to work with her on that. So that was amazing to like go back to my hometown and kind of bring arts back. But that's meeting her and kind of seeing for the first time, like, okay, here is an artist. Here's what working like the commercial side of the art industry looks like. This is a real job. I think I'd be really good at it. So at the start of my junior year, I took my first graphic design course and like I was sold. Didn't know what it was at the time, truthfully, but I kind of felt like this was right. So I spent the next couple years going all in, figuring it out.
Yeah. Well, that's so cool. I had no idea that you switched majors and that this person had such a maybe an unintended like effect on your trajectory. I'm sure she's getting a Christmas card, to this day. But when you were, you said you were always kind of sketching and drawing at the time. You're very creatively led. What were some of the things that you were kind of inspired by to sketch or illustrate or draw at the time?
Uh, it was a mixture of things that like either just made me happy and I'm like, I like that. I want to make that. That's what like I love like the kind of age that you and I are is that we grew up without what the internet is nowadays. Like it was a much cheaper version of the internet. We had so much free time. So I would use a lot of the free time just to kind of draw, create, sketch, and a lot of it was also inspired. I just wanted to make other people smile and happy and kind of build community with others, making them small little stuff. I still remember something haunts me. I made one of our like assistant volunteer coaches taught the pole vault and one of his athletes went to district. So I made him like a congratulatory cards and my dad's an electrician. So I spelled volts like volt like the electrician way instead of pole vault way.
That's cool.
Yeah, but, so very bad at spelling as a kid, but yeah, I just loved, like, kinda creating, like, cards, posters, especially being in sports, like, would always make stuff for my teammates.
That's cool. Yeah, just the intersection of like what art and the sport looks like at that time, right? Like, it's think about us growing up with trading cards and stuff before. Like now, maybe the next generation is growing up making like YouTube thumbnails or something like that, right? Like that maybe is their outlet. It,
Yeah.
it right. So it's cool to me that you were saying like what was modeled for you before was the idea of art is either like the frivolous. Right, I'm using words that I don't believe, but and I know you know me, but something that's like for museums for potentially, right? And this was the first commercial experience outside of education. So I come from a family of art educators, and so very similar. Like that was the practical application of art uh, for them, and that they saw modeled as well. And this was the first commercial opportunity that you mentioned. And when I think of that, I'm like, well, what does that even look like, right? Because for a lot of folks who might be familiar with the work that you do or what they think of with graphic design, it might feel like it's logo design or right, it maybe a single channel expression. Can you talk about some of like the folks who inspired you, whether they were working in sport or outside of it, and kind of what the definition of graphic design to encompass?
Yeah. For me, like, whenever I started, like, getting into the weeds in design school, one of the first artists that I heard of at the time, which I think almost any, like, college design artist around, like, 2000 and, like, 8 to 2000 and, like, 18, let's say that, like, 10-year window, like, one of the first artists that we all looked up to was Aaron Draplin, just kinda like clean well, didn't pioneer it because it used to be a thing, but kind of brought it back and revived it, this idea of just clean, crisp, bold design. Yeah, and it's just amazing. And then looking into my city, it's a small city. So where I grew up is about an hour south of Pittsburgh, and the college I went to is about a half an hour south of Pittsburgh. So kind of looking at my city, there's all these amazing agencies that were kind of like boutique style branding, advertising, web design agencies, and they were just creating such like amazing work that wasn't like anything else I saw. And that like highly shaped me and realizing very fast, like, okay, I want to do that. That's what I want to do.
That's great, and I'm glad you mentioned agency life, right? That was one of your first opportunities out of school with that degree was to go into an agency, kind of cut your teeth on, I imagine, a variety of projects, right?
Yeah, I remember because my parents, like, I graduated, they were nervous, but they kind of trusting the process. They didn't understand, like, what I would do in a day, so they'd be like, "What did you work on today?" Because they're thinking, like,
Almost like,
yeah. Oh, yeah, but it's like, "Okay, today I worked on, like, a billboard design for the such and such, and the next day I worked on a T-shirt design for this thing, and then the next day we had to do, like, social media ads, and then the next day I had to, like, resize, like, magazine ads that would go in, and then the next day I got to work on, like, a playing card grind kinda thing because it was such, like one of the first agencies I worked on was such a small agency, and it's kind of similar to the work that I do now. They, like, would do a lot of, like, marketing operations, like, events and activations, like, let's create these fun, awesome products and different things and kinda put it out into the world, whereas starting on that was a lot of fun to, like, learn about all these different things, and then just I went to an agency that was kind of like if you would think of Mad Men for anybody who watched that TV show. Now, as far as, like, doing the, like, very, very big projects, spending, like, weeks and months on, like, the same campaign kind of thing, so that, like, the day that today would look a lot more similar over there.
so you did have a really varied experience through the agency model. It's just sometimes rare for someone to have kind of both sides to it or multiple perspectives because, right? Like, I mean, I know you mentioned the age we are in, like the age bracket we're in, but we're still pretty young to have that level of varied experience is great. And I when I think about another moment that like kind of thrust you into um the eyes of many in the sport world, it was with a series you did about women's sports coverage in the New York Times. That was I remember being these like being what you were sharing. I remember resharing myself 'cause I thought it was like really powerful and kind of related to like Draplin's design principles of like it is clean, it is not it's not overly engineered. It's easy to discern the message because the communication visually was super clear. But could you share more about what the project was and that had?
Yeah, so for that, I didn't think I'd be mentioning my dad this much, but, he started, I should say, so it was around the time of Labor Day, and my dad is very outgoing, one of the most outgoing guys ever. So whenever somebody from the New York Times was doing a Labor Day piece talking to a bunch of different, like, working people, like a baker, somebody who works at a bank, somebody who works in the coal mine, so, they called up the coal mine that my dad was at, and I'm not sure who they were talking to, but they were like, "Hey, like, could we come in? Could we photograph a coal miner? Like, do you got anybody who's talkative?" And as soon as they said, like, "Do you have anybody who's talkative?" Their first thought was like, "Yes, come talk to Chuck." So that's how my dad got the role, just being known as, like, the biggest loudmouth. So he got, I think he got, like, a tiny interview, but I think they ended up just scrapping the interviews from everybody, but, like, there's a photo of, like, him and his hands, and it's just, like, the concept of, like, all these, like, the hands of labor, I think was the title. But, so whenever it hit the shelf on Labor Day, I went to the grocery store and I bought, like, 10 different copies of the New York Times because I was living in the city of Pittsburgh and, like, my parents, like, rural town, the town didn't get service, the New York Times, so I went out, got the paper, brought it home, took a photo, sent it to my family group chat, and then put aside papers that I'll give to them later. But I was, like, reading over my copy just, like, the whole time, basically, just wondering what was in it. Like, I never bought one before, just kind of seeing what the hype was, basically. And I got to the sports section, and there's, like, nothing about women's sports. And just flipping the pages, and I'm like, there's almost nothing about women's sports going on right now. But because of social media, we all have this algorithm that's catered to us. Like, I knew there's all these different, like, amazing women's sports stories that were happening at that very moment in time back then, because I see it online, I read it and stuff, but that's not reflected. Like, it's been a while since I had, like, a type of media source that wasn't, like, a curated algorithm. So for me, that it hit me like, "Oh, yeah, like, I see what, like, people mean about" like, I know there's no women's sports. I mean, I know there's not as much women's sports coverage as men's, but, like, seeing it in this way kind of hit home. So I was just kind of thinking about like, okay, do you want to show this on social media? What's kind of like the Aaron Draplin principle of like what would be like you look at this and you understand the concept within like 2 seconds of looking at it kind of thing. So it's like, should I like take Sharpie and black out everything that's not women's sports coverage? Should I white it out with like white out or paint? In the end, I decided like physically removing it and cutting it out was the best option. So that's why I did that, and I photographed it and uh, just uploaded to social media. It took about like from start to of me seeing it for the first time to like it going live took like less than like 20 minutes. It was super simple. And I decided like, okay, I'm gonna do this like every day. Like this will be my lunch break basically because I was still working full time at the agency. So it's like I'm gonna do this every day for a week. I think I ended up extending it to 10 days. But just kind of seeing like what would be the coverage like. And by day 3 or 4 is when it really started to like pick up and go like everywhere online.
It was so striking to see it visually, right? So just like you said, I love how you thought, what's the best way to simply represent the concept and removing it and creating these like almost like window panes of just nothing is the best way I could describe it.
Yeah.
Right? It's clearly said New York Times Sports on the top. And then I think there was like 1 or 2 days that had some coverage in it. But if I remember correctly, it was like top of it was like pinnacle, like something that was so important it couldn't be denied in pop culture level moment. It wasn't even like a just reporting regular scores or interest stories that would be probably like already exist on the male counterpart side. So I thought it was just so striking that when it was there again, what it had to be from like an execution standpoint, you know?
Yeah. And then so I did that for 10 days. And then I did it again for I think an entire month after that, just to like get bigger data source to mess with. Cause like I love science and data and all that kind of stuff. And I'm very artsy. Like I love like the analytical side of stuff. So I'm trying to remember where I was going with that. Oh, yeah. So I wanted to kind of just see not only a bigger plot of data, but just see what then happens, like what patterns would I start to recognize now that I have more data. Because some things you got to pour through it and you're going to find stuff that you didn't even expect to find. And one of that was there were so many front page cover stories. If there wasn't an important enough like men's sports story for the front page, they would just put like a fluff piece about like something about the community, something about the fan base, which is wonderful. I think that's great. Nothing wrong with that. However, it'd almost always be male fans like fanning about male sports. And like that was like getting way more coverage than professional women's sports as a whole. And like it infuriated me because there were so many times where like, just like the haters online would say stuff like, well, it's just simply like people want to read about good sports and good performances and like the top of excellence. So men just beat out women. It's as simple as that. It's nothing personal. And it's like, no, it's not. Like there's all these fluff pieces here. Like they're putting it because you readers do like that and enjoy it and see the value in it.
I was going to ask you what the reception was on this because I know you did more than one chapter of this, and I imagine that the responses varied. I know it was like overwhelmingly positive, and it was just such a great way to see it. And I'm sure there were some people who had to be naysayers of this, but yeah, I just imagine seeing these fluff pieces like, there's no big game this weekend, but they're going to do something about like a Bills fan jumping through a table before they put, somebody like a WNBA star who's like playing out of her mind and in such a good way, they're going to put the Bills story on the front page or something like that, I imagine. So
it's definitely a lot of online hate. The agency I was working at the time, they were like the Mad Men type of agency as far as just super good, prestigious, amazing, high caliber work. And like we worked for like Pittsburgh Steelers and all kind of other like amazing clients. But they weren't used to doing like kind of like a lot of social media based stuff. So like, because with like the internet, social media, there's all the hate that can pour in basically, because anybody and everybody could see it, comment on it, react it, all that. So I had to like prepare my bosses like, oh, we might get a lot of hate. Like, I'm fine. I'm good. Like, they're going to drive up the like interactions and like get the story to rank higher. Like to this day, if you type in, because I got interviewed by like a news company in Canada, it's one of like their biggest publications. They picked up the story and I got to interview with them for it. And to this day, if you type in women's sports graphic designer, my story used to be the top ranking. I think I'm now down to like second top ranking story on Google.
Yeah, this is just so cool to see. And, the thing that I imagine, and I'd never really thought about that. I studied print journalism in undergrad, which just I didn't necessarily study to go into print journalism, but I never thought about the echo chamber of like print journalism where what is somebody going to do? Write in. To like physically write a letter to complain or applaud or from a feedback loop perspective, it is pretty insulated until these, let's say, legacy publications go more into that like digital realm and open themselves up to that like conversation.
Hmm.
So super interesting. But yeah, you were up there.
4 years after this piece was written, I was on the front page of Google, like like women's sports graphic designer. I was like the first or second link, but it looked like a lot of stuff from like this current Olympics like started outranking it, which I love. That means there's finally more media about women's sports graphic designers. How was I still there for like 4 years after? But yeah, but I remember when that was published. They have comments at the bottom of it, and they said, like, they're like a newspaper, so they believe in like free speech. That being said, if there's any hate crimes going on, they delete the comments, but it has to get to a hate crime level comment for them to delete it, basically. Like, any stays up, like, that's their rule, which I agree with. I get it, free speech. So they're like, so your option is the comments are getting too much, because it might be a lot of hate because, they write a lot of stories. They understand that it's going to be about, like a topic like women's sports like this. It was a very tame article, but it's going to trigger a lot of keyboard warriors. So just be prepared. You'll get hate comments. If you want, the option is to either just let the comments be and don't read it, or we can turn comments off so nobody can comment. But like, that's kind of it. The comments have to stay whatever they are, even if we don't like them, kind of thing.
Wow. Yeah, I'm looking at them right now. I'm gonna link this in our show notes for people to see because like it's an awesome story for people to see like kind of a summation of what the project was and kind of bringing the attention to your words that were in the original Instagram post too, which is great. And then also just for people to see what the comments look like. There's repeat offenders in there that love commenting on other comments, but to say this on like the positive side, the momentum it gave you and like thrusting you back into the sports realm, right? This is also at a time where you were freelancing as well and kind of picking up some clients. I know, right? You did some work with Brooks, did some work with Atalanta, and then also with like Pittsburgh Track Club and various run clubs. Is there any things from that kind of freelancer era that stood out to you most? Like some projects you were really excited about working on?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Some of the projects were thanks to that article, just because like it was on Google for so long that that's how some people found me, and like the only reason that technically was through like um the comments, because before it was just a fringe article that was written for the CBC, like a super tiny article, but the amount of engagement the story was getting, it got to be front page of the CBC. And that's like kind of like why it led to so much work. But um for like during the like freelance time when I first started, it was just kind of like me working with my friends in the industry. So like some of my college teammates were super amazing and went on to train post college to kind of get the best out of themselves and see what they can do. One of them was Aaron Dinzio. He went out to Providence to train with Molly and Kurt. Uh, and through him, it's kind of like when I first got to meet a lot of different professionals in the sport, and I started doing graphic design work, like for their, like if they were putting on like a 5K local community run or like a running clinic or something, they kind of needed a graphic designer, didn't really know of anybody. So Dins was awesome, just like always putting my name out there to different people. It just cuts like that's how I got my work in front of people to start with, just kind of like smaller projects. And then it kind of was just like, oh, going a step up the ladder every time. So like from like global community 5 runs to, okay, we're now a brand and we're now collaborating with this run club. Would you make the stuff? Okay, now we're a brand and we actually want to hire you directly and have you start to finally do work for us directly. So it kind of just like slowly led to that.
And it stepped up from there. And like I could see right, the visual style that I associate with you is so distinct that it's like I imagine somebody from a brand, whether they see the digital assets or physical assets that you were making at the time, were kind of, we want that. And that became like the fervor around it to say, all right, like let's do something together. And the momentum that I see, I know that you had through that time, I was following along with. I remember there's a race that Pittsburgh Track Club did at the time, and then you did. I mean, this is kind of getting into the larger scope and scale of the work you were doing, because I always knew like the graphic visual language that you were creating. You had an event with Pittsburgh Track Club, making merch. I think it was like is maybe Mile Festival or some kind of track meet.
He should know this.
There was Palm Tree,
Yeah, we had the island.
right? And then also with that, I remember you set up a photo backdrop where you assembled, you like curated and assembled all of these old kind of like Coleman coolers, right? And stacked them up in this kind of Lego brick uh, wall. It was like a backdrop for the photos. And I remember seeing that. I was like, I've never seen that before. That is so cool. And like it related back to the theme of things. So it was like you started the concept of like world building years before you were formally working with brands. And to me, that stood out and kind of like foreshadowed the way things went from there. Like,
A lot of that stuff. Massive shout out to Yuris Silenix of the Pittsburgh Track Club. He's the founder, and coach of the club. And for that event, we were just kind of, he married my college teammate, Julia. So that's how I met him, and they're in my city. And it's just kind of like, we want to, because for our city of Pittsburgh, like I know for other cities like Boulder and elsewhere, it's super common to have tons of like run club, just very fast members. Let's just like put it that way, I guess. But like that kind of, there wasn't like, very rare, first of all, to have run clubs in Pittsburgh years ago when the club first founded. It was like kind of before the like it truly like became like the fad that it is nowadays. But also like all the run clubs, there wasn't any run club in our city that had a pace group that was a pace that like uh the guys and girls who were in the club were trying to like train and reach and hit, just because they're like trying to, strive for like Olympic marathon trial qualification times. So yours kind of put together a training club to help make it easier for everybody to get together and actually get the training in. And then, so for a really small city like our city, we had, I think, 3 or 4 different club members qualified for the most recent trials, which is huge for like a small city like us. Yeah. But it was just kind of like a bunch of people in their like 20s, early 30s doing anything that we could. Like we all had full-time jobs, but we wanted to make the club as legit as we could. So like we like designed and built like this very professional looking website. We would put on like very professionally done races and events. Like we would do anything that we could in our free time and like just try to be resourceful where we could. So the water cooler wall that we made, we did it because I thrift a lot, and I would see these water coolers like marked down for like $2, $3 per cooler. And I'm like, they're kind of big and massive and colorful, and they relate back to our sport. And we could get like a wire shelving like unit from like Home Depot for really cheap, and we can kind of just make an entire amazing looking wall, because this was around the time where I would see people bringing like the sheets and like doing the let's just like get like a bed sheet kind of thing and do that and take people's portraits at races, which I loved. So it's like I like the idea of doing portraits at races, so we decided to make this wall, and we're able to do it for like under $50.
it's super cool because I think I remember that era of like the people largely associate like the white backdrop with a professional studio environment. I know there's a few photographers that were really keen on taking that and kind of challenging it, and even from like the principles of art and design, being like, let's kind of deconstruct the environment. Let's make it look a little bit more DIY, where maybe it's held up by people that are off screen that you need to see a hand in. And that's like the beauty of how almost like chaotic it felt at the time. And I love how, right, in the same way that those folks looked at deconstructing the photo environment, you looked at that instead. Awesome backdrop post race. Let's make it maybe even more like installated within this brand universe, and now we have art. And so it's just thinking about like how inspiration comes from just a multitude of places is super cool for, I think, for people to think about, because often, yeah, they might see it on Instagram, but to think about how you got there and who your references were, I think is one of the coolest things for us to reflect on, for sure. Yeah. Well, I know that around this time, kind of moving even more and more into the run and outdoor space, right? You co-founded your own creative studio with Aisha McAdams, and the projects that you've been able to do are just, I mean, I have a list in front, right? You worked with HOKA, Adidas, Puma, Under Armour, Brooks, Pittsburgh Steelers, Biathlon Canada's national team, Pittsburgh Track Club, Fleet Feet, Rattlebluff Creative, Atalanta NYC, like all of that's heavy hitters that are within the running industry and then peripheral, just generally in the sports industry as well. And the thing that I want to focus on or ask you more about from a case study perspective is working with HOKA, because although the work you've done with all of these brands has been super cool, you've been able to work with HOKA in several modalities. So you've worked with them in road, in trail, in track, and cross country. And I think they pose an interesting challenge that I'm sure you'll share more about, because these different projects you took on are for different audiences within their like brand umbrella. So could you share some info about like whether you can go into as much detail as you want, but the what it was like to work across all of those different things?
Yeah, definitely. You absolutely love HOKA. We whenever Rome was first founded and started, HOKA was our very first client, and it's been over 2 years with them now, and it's just been amazing across the board. And we work with different members of their team. So we work kind of like two different buckets. We'll work with Craig Lutz. He was the first one to hire us, and it's for like their high school / prep level events. So cross country, track, all of that aimed at high school and college kids. And then the second bucket is led by Alex War. He does a lot of their events, partnerships, activations. So think of like any major marathon or all these different trail races, stuff like that. And just getting to work with them. They're both so like highly in love with the sport and get the sport and want to provide such an amazing opportunity to the community who is also obsessed with the sport, because the events that we're doing tend to be at something that like it's not like a random like they have a different team that will do stuff like, oh, let's do like an activation on social media for like the kind of general public, which that's also terrific work. We haven't really done any of that work with them yet. We're working with the side that kind of is like super like in the know about the sport, and because the Alex and Craig are there and able to like approve the ideas that we pitch and come up with and collaborate with them on, it's like why we got to make so many amazing things over the years. So definitely want to give them like a thanks. Uh, but yeah, for the projects, we love the first, some of the projects started out super kind of tiny, like let's go in, what if we do a photo shoot at a track meet, kind of like expanding upon like ever growing the just like the like canon of like what is in the sport and what inspires what. So like it started out with like a sheet draped at a track meet doing photos. Like what if there's an entire photo shoot, like not like a water cooler wall, but like an entire concept photo shoot, like world build. So we started kind of doing that and playing around with what that could be. Does it have to relate something sports specific? We create like a whole different like tangent world and kind of create this like kind of fun experience, especially for the high schoolers. Like how can we like bring them on set for like 10-15 minutes, get their mind off this like one of the most important races of their young lives, let them like kind of relax, have some fun, yet like get a media photo headshot that like makes them feel confident and excited. And there's like great music playing in the background. And we'll do like the fun photos as well with their friends and stuff like that. Yeah, it's just been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I saw like, I remember seeing photos from it, and I feel like I've seen the shots that are normally taken at something like the Foot Locker, the NXN, that are, the typical arms crossed kind of intense athlete. And it's, putting it's definitely an approach, right? It's putting this high school athlete in the arena and visually representing them in the same way that their professional counterpart would be. It's like their big moment of making it. It's cool. But I remember seeing festivals of miles and seeing the cross country shoots that you were doing. And I remember seeing this like, you know, built this set of this like golf cart that had gone, you know, I had like they hijacked a golf cart and they're like driving it through this thing and it's kind of crazy. People were hanging off the side. It was like, that is so fun. I mean, is that like, would that work for, you know, the Mesa Marathon having a photo set like that? Probably not, because it's not the same, like, it's not that audience. But thinking about high school kids in that like moment of fun and also being like naive and a little mischievous, and it just seemed like you hit the nail on the head with what that group would want to be a part of.
Definitely, yeah. For that set, we found that like a vintage teal blue golf cart is amazing on Facebook. Yeah, it's beautiful color. We didn't have to change it. We found it on Facebook Marketplace, like near the San Diego area. So we bought it. I reupholstered the seats because they were like very worn down. So we got like new like white leather seats in there. We put some like peel and stick vinyl that I made myself with like my Cricut, like HOKA logos, Foot Locker logos, all that kind of plastered it on the car. We took the school battery out of the car while it was on set just because we didn't want any of the kids to kill themselves or like the photographer was right in front of the car. So on set, there's no battery in it. And we're like, shake it. Like, if you guys break it, it's fine. So like they would literally be like using their bodies, like 10 of them shoved into the car to like sway it in different directions to get it to lean like that, which made for a really fun set experience for them.
It is so cool. I know. Just made the nail on the head too. And I've seen like, as we've seen an increase in the way like they are spending for these younger athletes around these experiences, like it made me think about all of the touch points that they get with your level of design and like the way that you're kind of going through things. I know, right, there's like merchandise that's involved and just general like decorative elements that are even around like the arena or the track that they get to interact in. So it is more so than just like, all right, cool, we built a set for them to take photos. It's really an integrated model in the way that they're presenting themselves. And
And like half our set prep area is just like off to the side. It's like a massive prop table. It has all the clothes, accessories, props that you can imagine, basically. And at the end of Foot Locker, we have a lot of some stuff we will reuse for future years, or we think we will. So I'll kind of like take it back home with me, set aside in storage. And then, but probably like 75% of the stuff was just custom made for that event. So we'll basically have like a Foot Locker sample sale that we call it. It's completely free for the kids. They don't have to pay anything, but we say like, okay, at the end of the invite, like during like the Foot Locker after party time, some point, like I'll come bring all the gear, set it up, and like you guys can take whatever you want for free. And like they love that. They had side.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Like it feels like the benchmark for like youth track and field used to be like how cool the New Balance backpack was if you got invited right to nationals. And then now thinking about something that's like bespoke for that event that is different from a design perspective, from like even you wouldn't be able to anticipate from year to year what would be there in this sample sale from a design perspective. I feel super cool for that.
It was like we had I have a friend in Pittsburgh named CJ, and she can crochet really good, like put an image in the crochet basically. So since it was golf themed, we had her make some like custom crocheted like golf like vest with like the Foot Locker logo crocheted right into the vest kind of thing. So some of the items that were out for grabs, or even just like other sets, like working with Sidious Cafe that HOKA does for major marathons. Like we made for New York City Marathon, made like a tile subway sign. Like I hand tiled it myself. And it was so much fun, like making custom stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I do want to ask you about I mean, City's Cafe, where we've seen it represented more than once. I remember seeing it at the trials. I think that was the first one at the marathon trials. And the cool thing about this, I wasn't there. I was just like spectating online. And the thing that blew me away about this is the execution on this cafe environment where you took over an actual cafe area or like coffee bar that was right in the middle of Orlando where the trials were, but you designed every aspect. You designed the paper placemats that would go on the plastic trays. You designed even like the little accoutrements on the way to the bathroom. There was a lost shoe, pull tab, if lost, call this, or if found, call this, or the new shoe that was launched.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that was crazy. There was integrations with athletes and they had aprons and hats and like the entire thing was thought of. Even just like the thinking of the right font to use in all of these things is like so intentional. But what was that process like? Because that felt like a whole other chapter of kind of building out what things were. And then obviously in New York as well, I was able to see it in person, building out and kind of playing into the subway aesthetic and this underground theme was super cool where you hand tiled that background. What was it like kind of starting those conversations in the road world with HOKA?
Yeah. So for that stuff for like the Citius Cafe, Alex like came up with the concept. They knew that because there's already a thing where like you would bring in like different podcast people to cover what your event was doing or what your brand was doing at events. So they wanted to bring in like Citius was doing it like at Olympics, at all these different things, kind of things. And it was just kind of before like a brand would come in, kind of slap their logo on front of whatever they're doing, maybe make some like custom, like here's 100 shirts, Citius, that you can give out to your people, like do a group run, like say it's the brand name group run and just give out the shirts. And that was kind of how the brands were involved originally. And then HOKA, they're like, we don't want to do just that. We want to like make it this entire thing. So Alex wanted it to be like a Citius Cafe coffee shop. Let's have the pop up, take over a local coffee shop for the trials. They'll do all the live streaming, previewing, and like race day stuff for the trials there at the coffee shop. So we could serve coffee to the public. We'll have all this amazing custom merch made and everything. So that's what like I got brought in around then of, okay, this is what we're going to do. And I used to work at a coffee shop. I worked as a barista for a little bit in the past. And like, that's kind of like how I do like all like the different little touches that make it feel like a coffee shop. Like we had the free drink tokens that were like custom HOKA tokens. We had like the coffee shop bulletin board with like, it was covered in tons of posters. We had to hand design and make every poster and how to like age them to make it look like they were like kind of used in there for a while and like layer them up. We got like custom, like we didn't want to just kind of produce like lower quality giveaway items. We were like, let's just do a few, but do them very well. Like we had somebody like make a screen print right onto the like the diner mugs, like the old school way of doing it, and make these like amazing high quality like diner mugs that say Citius Cafe and HOKA on it. Let's just kind of make it this amazing item. Like we'd rather have like 50 or 100 people have this really, really amazing high quality item that we're giving away versus like 500 people having a much lower quality item, if that makes sense. I thought would like have to make stuff in bulk, so figure out like what item is worth to involve and what isn't.
Totally. And I imagine too, like, not to dissect this from a business lens too much, but in the idea of having something that's quality, it is scarce. It does create a sense of urgency and it does create these moments that are kind of like the user generated content moments for the person who gets it or doesn't get it. To go around. I had no idea that you aged the posters that would made it like, stack them up and, it was so well done from like a end to end element and to see them kind of reinvest in the concept again, or at least like working with you to flesh out the concept for New York to say, hey, we're going to pursue kind of a universe environment for New York Marathon 2024 and the subway aesthetic, something that you went into. Tell us I want to know how long it took you to hand tile the Citius Cafe subway set.
Yeah. I think start to finish, maybe like it took 15 hours because I didn't know what I was doing. But if I were to do it again over now that I know what I'm doing more, it would probably only take like 6 hours. So it was 7 feet long. So I drove all the props from Pittsburgh to New York City. So I had to like make it into 2 different sections so it would fit in my car. And then I would get to New York there, like on Fifth Ave, and like put it together, put the frame around it, mortar the like dividing piece And we got it on the wall with all the other like custom wall props I either designed or like thrifted or got secondhand to kind of curate and build up the set for it. Uh, yeah, and then I like that you like mentioned the like scarcity of like some of the merch stuff. Like that's definitely something that we are already like cognizant keeping in mind because like there is a lot of like kind of unnecessary like scarcity and elitism sometimes with the running events that like brands put on. So we're always like trying to toe the line of we do want to like make something high quality, which means we can't make too much of it. But how do we do it in a way that like still supports the community without excluding people? And like something that we'll do a lot is kind of sit down and try to figure out like, okay, is this an item that we're giving out at like the run group run, for example? Like, okay, how many people are realistically going to be there? And we need to make sure there's definitely enough items to cover. So like everybody's getting something. No one's like getting excluded, like kind of reverse engineering the budget backwards that way. And then we can like figure out really cool items. And sometimes maybe we're making an item that's like smaller or different, but sometimes it works out in the end because it's like, yeah, we'll have like 500 t-shirts already from all these different events. Like it is fun to like make one of these other kind of more rare items like the mugs.
Yeah. And when I think about promotional items, it adds up quickly. I remember at Track Festival, we would do the marathon pop-up marathon pack that we would give away for folks who wanted to come by. We give them away for free. We made 1,000 of them, and they would go super quick because it was just first come first serve. And I remember having conversations because, of course, people, the 1,000 and first person who doesn't get one is, oh my gosh, and I didn't enjoy that in any way, shape, or form. That's how people were out, but
It's so hard. The prop table handing out stuff when we ran out. I'm like,
right. And I remember talking to somebody in operations and they were like, do you know how expensive it is for us to produce each one of these things? Like it's a custom tote. It's a custom like CLA cap. So like they're not cheap because they're great quality, just like you mentioned as well. And then we would throw in some other like periodicals that we would make just for this. And then other elements, we would hand sticker bananas and like the sticker would be like a Tracksmith logo instead of the Chiquita sticker.
one person for the first time. I love the little stickers. Just like that detail.
The bags that we were giving away for free, just for marathon runners to come by, I know it's all like, it all comes out of the wash, and it is like it can be, there's people way smarter than I am about balancing budgets and things, but I remember these bags were like $25 or $30 of just cost, and multiply that by 1,000, and just knowing that was an expense you had to take on months before you even start making the money back from like a merch sales or whatever. But it was so cool to do things like that. And to, like you mentioned, not just do another t-shirt, because how many places could you go either in the expo itself or around a race weekend and just kind of acquire a ton of stuff that people are just kind of giving away their whatever is the cheapest thing they could create for you. Like, I don't know if I need an A6 pencil sharpener, not to say they haven't made one, but it's like finally something cool.
Yeah, or like with the tote bags, like they fall apart after like 5 uses, or some of the water bottles like they leak. Like it's just, like with how like just bad the world is. It's like how do we like do stuff that like is a bit more environmentally friendly and like higher quality? Yeah,
Good point. There's like, the overconsumption like side of things. Well, like, do we need to make 10,000 water bottles that you will throw out because they do not perform well? Probably not. Yeah. And I know in the world building space as well, right? Like you also worked at HOKA around Western State last year. And I remember seeing like you set up a podcast studio and visual identity and also kind of just a campaign that they were able to work with HOKA and Free Trail through the village that was there. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
yeah, that was awesome. So there was like another coffee shop pop up thing. So that they worked with Free Trail Podcast for this at Westerton, and this is through Alex again for the project, and they kind of just wanted to create an entire like saloon basically. So I got to so I designed what the set would look like, then worked with fabricators who would go in and build the set that I designed. And then I would go in afterwards and dress the set, add all the different custom props and accessories and anything that we made.
I feel like I even saw they, and I'm sorry if you just said this, but they installed saloon doors that didn't exist in the room,
Yeah,
right?
we built our focus wall for the saloon doors to go onto. And we can like kind of open them and like you can kind of peer it because we're in the like the back room of the coffee shop in but in like Olympic Village. So you can like kind of peer it into the back room and you would enter through the saloon doors just so we can kind of like control traffic and also like you're physically entering the new world kind of thing. I have a friend who's a professional sign painter, so I had him paint this like amazing like if you ever see like the wooden signs that you hang up somewhere and they're kind of crooked and it's like gone fishing. So like I had him make us a sign that said like set closed for filming kind of thing, or you flip it over, it's like set open, like come on in, just because would have to close those saloon doors at times to film and like make it a closed set during that time.
It's cool for me to think about even just that little micro element because, right, this was primarily an environment built for as a set for them to have a backdrop through the live stream, through all the pre-show and post-show elements. And I remember seeing the signs that was like, "This is my first rodeo. This isn't my first rodeo." Right? Like that was cute. But even thinking to the degree of, well, it would be cool if people could enter the space and more, like commune with the details a little bit more and saying like, hey, what if we solved for that by putting this door up, by inviting people into the space with this hand painted sign that stays on brand and bring people closer to it instead of it being like a, s- a set or like an on, almost like a sound stage kind of thing that could have been the ultimate way this was done. But I think kind of connecting the people who want to be in the room with the opportunity was like a home run as well.
Yes. And for that, like the coffee shop, whenever it was like strictly a coffee shop for Sidious, because I had a coffee shop background, like I was able to kind of dive into that past experience. But for like the Western set or anytime I do a set that I don't have a lot of experience in, we just go like spend weeks heavily researching and concepting and kind of like learning about all these different things, taking screen grabs, writing notes, and kind of just slowly trying to accurately build this entire world basically and noticing like what are the small details. And then we like try to figure out like how can we like uh if like whenever we get there like on set or like this is ongoing, like what's going like trying to predict ahead of time, plan ahead of time, like what's the experience gonna be like for people who are a part of this that know what's going on and what's the experience gonna be for like people within like the like run community who kind of they're not associated with the brand, but like they're here at the event running Western States. This is very important to them. Like it does kind of suck whenever like you're there just try to like run your event and like go to the local coffee shops or like restaurants and stuff and they partnered with so and so brand and like there's kind of like everything's roped off, you're not invited back, you can't like go do this or that, you don't know what you're allowed to do, are you going to be rude if you like enter the space and like not do the right thing, like it's just a lot of pressure. So we want to make sure that we're kind of like keeping that in mind and trying to explain through design to make it like easier for people.
That's a really cool phrase of explain through design. And like this, I'm going to remember that for sure after this. I'm going to like, give this the name of this podcast, this podcast episode. But the thing that I wonder, because like, it's such an amazing insight, right? Of, like thinking about the experience of the person who's like tapped in versus the person who's not. It just happens upon us, right? I think of, was this something that became more clear to you over time as you did more of these projects, or is that something that where the brands kind of challenged you to think in that way, or and of how did you reach that conclusion? Because it's an amazing insight.
It was kind of like a mixture. Like I think I started out as an outsider. Like I did run in college, but I ran Division 2. I wasn't that good. Um, like whenever I was first kind of entering, like I didn't like look like a super fast runner or anything. So like when I was first entering the industry and like was trying to like go to stuff to network and stuff, I kind of just felt like an outsider. And like now that like I'm definitely no longer like considered an outsider, I still want to make sure that's like accessible and welcoming to like all and everyone.
That's super cool. And there's so many points where like your personal experience, you're just your personal insights have just infiltrated your design and like the way that you work with brands. And whether I'm sure it's top of mind for you or not, I'm sure the people who are working with you are like, they know you get it from that perspective of just it's what comes with the package in addition to all the things that you see visually is kind of the way that you see it fit within brand language. And the one of the things I'd love to know, right? Because you've worked with the HOKAs of the world that have done these huge activations. And the wild thing for me to think about is, right, like this is a huge part of the visual language side, but often this is one of many ways that they are integrating all of this like huge strategy around an event. This is one of several things they do. So that's on like the huge brand side. And you've also worked with some emerging brands or creative agencies and smaller teams in that regard. Besides the budget, which is like to me the most obvious difference between them, are there any differences that you kind of discern between what it's like to work with a big brand versus a small brand, or is it really dependent on like the people you work with at either one of those places and or something like that? What would you say?
I think it's definitely like highly dependent on like the people that you're working with in like sense like I'm like one person, like I definitely like am watchful of like I can't like do every single project. So I get the benefit of like kind of being mindful of what projects I'm taking on. And because like I keep to like a high quality of work, it's benefited in the long run in which like people notice it and see it and want it. And I could kind of be choosy and make sure that I only ever have to work with like wonderful people who get it, which is lovely. That being said, I also love working with small businesses too. Like growing up in a small town, like it takes a village. Is kind of like what like that community driven approach was so important to me. I was younger, and like nowadays seeing like so many of like my friends and other people starting small businesses and like understanding that there is a bit of cost restraint. Like I love like setting aside time in my working calendar year and making sure like, okay, I want to do like at least one small business project a quarter just because I want to like still be in touch and connected with people in the community.
I definitely see and something I really appreciate about your outlook and is regardless of the client, whether it's working on a podcast logo or working with one of these like household name brands or anything in between, I feel like I've known your perspective to be like, you think about so many elements, you think about everything the same way. Like, it's not like because the client is coming to you with a larger budget that they're being thought of in a different way. You're kind of matching the output to what's feasible, but the way that you are mindfully thinking about all these factors is the same for all of them. And I think that's what makes it like really attractive to work with someone like yourself who is going to bring their best, put their best foot forward, regardless of what the budget is $200,000 or 2,000 or $1,000. I think you're going to party your bet regardless. I feel like that's super clear to me, but kind of comes from this like really, I don't know, like you said, small town vibes. Like you want to help people do their best work, and this is your way of kind of giving back in a way by helping them put their best foot forward too.
Yeah. Like I remember like growing up where I'm from, like the average family only make or the average individual only makes 19,000 a year. So like kind of that being the hometown that I grew up in. Like but there's like different types of pressures, I guess I'll say, because now like I go to these top high school events, and some of the high schoolers came from backgrounds like me, but some of them came from very like privileged, wonderful backgrounds, which I don't like hate them for it. That's wonderful. Like I wish everybody could like grow up like that. But I would see like I remember being a camp counselor at a camp for like young runners, and there was a lot of really like awesome people that went to great schools, had great GPAs, all that kind of stuff. And I would like see all the kind of internal pressures that they would have. Like one girl, she was going into her senior year. She got a perfect score in the SAT, but she's like kind of saying it with a frown on her face anytime she retells the story. I'm like, that's amazing. Why aren't you excited? You should be so proud of yourself. And she's like, well, my younger brother did it like in ninth grade. So like like she kind of felt like by comparison, like being a failure. And I noticed like through so many other people, kind of like like there is a ton of pressure associated to like the bar is way up here because you're surrounded by bars way up here from everybody else. So like for me, it kind of like took the weight off in a sense. At first I thought it would lead to a lot of like imposter syndrome. And then I just kind of noticed like, nah, I feel good. I feel like a blog. I don't feel like posture. Like I just feel like I don't have like an unnecessary weight. Like at first it was like I need to self-support myself financially. Like that's my goal. That's why I went to college. I want to be self-supported financially and like have the freedom to like do what I want for work and not worry about like paycheck to paycheck, that kind of stuff. And when I met that goal pretty early in my career, I was like, that feels great. Like, okay, like, yeah, now I want to like eventually own a home, which we now do thanks to living in Pittsburgh and there's affordable property, but it's like, I just want to create really good, meaningful work. Um, and like, that's just kind of the goal. Like anything beyond that, like I make enough. Like I like the work that I'm doing. Like I feel very satisfied. Like those are the kind of things that drive me.
I feel like I'm getting inspiration for like creative inspiration, but then also I'm getting some good life advice right now. So I appreciate you giving me double duty right now. This is it's so great. And when I think about like you had this kind of tacit message that I know you're just getting started in all of this. And there's so much that is yet to be done. And even if, the same brands want to come back to you to do something, I know you're going to do it differently. It's just the way that you think. And you're like, well, everything is a function of timing, right? Like the way that these brands are being received 6 months from now or 2 years from now may dictate the way and you design and collaborate with them. And there's always another brand that's going to come up and be able to work with you. And I just wonder, in the way that you've worked thus far, like what are some main learnings? Because I know you were talking to me about kind of some three principles you pulled out about working with brands. What are some of those learnings that you want to share with folks?
Yeah. Yeah, for that. Is this what we were talking about, like the litmus test stuff that we are talking about before?
Yeah, yeah, I thought those are really cool points because you mentioned, right, like uh, those 3 bullet points, but I'm sure they can get into them even deeper.
Yeah, for that, just trying to just because like everything's changing so fast, like what like the activation brand partnership space has looked like in the past few years is so different than it was pre-pandemic, and it's still changing to this day. To just try to like keep a cool, calm, collected head on ourselves as we're doing it, and like putting together like a litmus test basically. So like when it comes to the merch, which we've already talked about, like, is this gonna be an item that somebody, they pick it up 5 minutes later, is it still gonna be in their hand, or are they trying to pawn it off to somebody else? Or are they trying to tuck it in the garbage when no one's looking? Or are they gonna, okay, fine, I'll lug it home, but it's gonna stay in the bottom of like a junk drawer for years, so I finally donate it to Goodwill kind of thing, like there's so much stuff that's produced like that. So like it needs to pass that test. It like passes the 5 minutes of like awe and wonder, and then okay, still like this thing. I still want to keep it past that. And then we also like to play around a lot with pacing, especially some of these events like Foot Locker, some of these high school races that we do, that we bring all the kids out to. We get to like kind of talk to them beforehand and after. That's also an option. So could we like ace out the experience? So like for Foot Locker, for example, last year we started offering the Foot Locker yearbook just because there's so many amazing photos from all of Foot Locker weekend. Um, and instead of just like sending them a link of here's where the photos are that you can access, we wanted to put together like a physical, tangible yearbook that has like photos from the race, like their headshot photos. We gave them disposable cameras and they took photos like all weekend long of each other, like photos they took themselves. We got the photos developed to put it in the yearbook. And we physically mail that out to all of the kids. And we'll sometimes put some other fun stuff in the package for them, like candy or maybe like a sweatshirt or something. And we'll send that to them after the race. And it's like just like a really nice experience to get that. And had we gave them something in the moment during Foot Locker, they're there for like 4 days. by the day 3, day 4, they're kind of overwhelmed with the amount of free stuff they're giving. Like, I've been there working at day 3, day 4, and we're trying to, like, give them free stuff. Like, this pennant, actually, we made these, awesome, like, Foot Locker pennants and gave it out, like, around the time of, like, the final, like, night dinner kind of thing. And there's just, like, a lot of kids, like, not taking it because they're like, it's just full. They have so much other stuff. Like, they weren't being, like, ungrateful or anything. Like, the kids are so nice and grateful the entire experience. It was just a lot. So we're like, okay, next year we're not gonna do that at dinner. What if we put it in the, like, package it afterwards and, like, pace out these. Sorry, I'm, like, choking on air.
You're good. Well, to give you a moment to catch your breath, this is something I completely took for granted, to be completely honest, right? Like, the pacing of the experience, especially if it's like a multi-day, or even if it's a single day event, just knowing when people are going to interact with different things. And I imagine that dictates the amount of detail that you introduce, the moments that you try to kind of draw, let's say, maximum attention and like build towards kind of like music in a way, right? Where like you crescendo to the moment and then you decrescendo out because it can't be always on. That's impossible. And then also something I think about is like a weird parallel, but like going to like the Grammys or the Oscars or one of these like award shows where they give you like the goodie bag after, right? And they just give you like a package full of things. And a lot of times at some of these events, they might give you those things up front. So you don't have time to really understand what they are or how they fit or any significance of that thing that you receive because you're not in the arena of what was built.
Totally. Yeah, about those items, then if you get it up, like, getting it at the wrong moment could just be just as bad as, like, getting it, like, at the right moment, but, like, overloaded with everything else.
Yeah. It's just such a thing that it's one of those things probably now that you've introduced this to my brain, I will never be able to unsee it, right? It's like this glass shattering moment over my head. So the moments that are paced well versus not are going to be more obvious to me and maybe people listening to this more so than ever before. But all of this stuff kind of fits within that larger concept. I know we've mentioned a few times, like that world building side of things. And just to kind of like go into that a little bit more, not necessarily academically, but could you share more about that concept and how this,
Definitely.
fuel these collaborations?
Mhm. As we're talking about it now, like, I think that, like, a lot of it started from, like, my days when I was, like, teaching. So, like, I have a lot of people who ask me, like, "Oh, you did, like, 2 year you took, like, 4 semesters that, like, were completely lost, wasted. That must have sucked." And I'm like, "No, I learned so much from it." Like, it gave me tons of, like, discipline. Like, I believe in education as a whole. Like, it made me a better, more structured person, which I think prepped me come design. Just that I had so much structure built in from the teaching. But one thing that we would learn heavily as teachers was classroom management. Kids are crazy. You gotta manage everything. Like, the moment they walk into your classroom door, you're gonna manage that experience. Basically build that world of not only how you want it to look, but how you want it structured, how you want them to act. A lot of times, like, if it's designed good, you don't even notice that a structure is put into place so you act the way that you act, and, like, it flows better. And, like, I remember, like, we'd have to do, like, lessons and, like, go into, like, the local school districts and, like, teach lessons and stuff. And I would be doing that, and I get feedback afterwards, like, if I was teaching, like, a science lesson that had, like, an interactive piece to it. And it's like, okay, in the future, like, you shouldn't give the kids that, say if it was like, okay, here's your, like, ruler and, like, your grid stuff, like, all the, like, the module stuff. It's like, in the future, don't give that stuff out until you explain the instructions, and then you give it out because they're just gonna be sitting there playing with it, distracted and not listening to you the whole time. So just that's the first time I learned about, like, pacing and experience out. Uh, and then, like, world building for the event, it was just kind of like the idea of we don't have to leave any stone unturned, and sometimes, like, those really, really small moments that don't cost a whole lot of money and are just, like, super tiny that some people aren't gonna see all of it. That's totally fine. Like, but they'll see some of it, and, like, when they see it, like, it's can be just as impactful as, like, some of the big major stuff. So it's just like with world building, like, don't leave anything on the table. Like, we can, like, kinda customize the experience of anything and everything.
It's like that concept of Easter eggs, right? Like that people talk about of just sometimes people refer to that like in video games, right? Like you go into whatever room or whatever level, you do X, Y, and Z, and then it shows you something that you wouldn't normally find. And I feel like more and more brands are kind of paying attention to that as a concept that, make that a moment of discovery with brand super cool. And something that I haven't thought about too much in things, because I think about a lot of these world building moments largely in person and how people get to interact in a physical space. But I know there's also like the world building concepts that can be kind of transferred over digitally as well. I know a lot of what you do is fully encompassing, where it's not only the environments that you create, but it's also the assets that come out of it. So that is, I think, just another note that like in the idea of a world building thing, it's not like you're going to a chain restaurant and this is like a microcosm of the world. It's actually much more complex of that, because if we really think about, let's say the Western States activation, the people who are able to experience that in person are a few hundred people, maybe into a few thousands that are able to physically see that. But then the assets beyond it and the way that they're displayed and showcased are going to impact so many more. So I love the detail side of things. And I really like your outlook on, if it's seen and it's intentional and people enjoy it, but it's not important necessarily for them to discover that one element. In the same way that, like, back to the fine art side of things, that, the small details that are in a Renaissance painting aren't necessarily to be perceived and absorbed in the first time you see it, per se. Mm-hmm. And you might need to comb over that, not to necessarily like draw the comparison to a Where's Waldo book, but like, when you find that thing, it feels special because you chose to engage with it further. Super cool.
Definitely.
I love these three things, like the litmus test for the merch, the world building, and the experience pacing. Like, what a good takeaway from this thing. And I know, like you said, this is an ever changing field because this is different now after the pandemic than it was before. And I guess, like, maybe as a wrap up question in this, as you anticipate the changes in like what experiential marketing and this creative expression looks like, how do you intend to try to like stay on it, to absorb what those changes are and to incorporate what they are in real life? Do you have a plan in mind?
Part of it is just like trying to like reason like why community is so important. Like, I got into the sport because I love it. I love the community side, and like I'm trying to like make sure that I don't take too much work on that. I no longer get to enjoy the community side anymore. So like just like really getting to stay, like, I keep having fun, staying a fan of the sport, like making sure I'm making time for like my own like mental health and like free time that I can like nerd out over things. And sometimes it's not even running. It's just like I want to, like, actually the tiling came through because I want to do a lot of home renovation stuff. Alex Floor saw me renovating my bathroom on Insta. I was posting like that I retiled the floors. He's like, "Oh, you could tile, okay. We want you to tile the subway side now." But, like, that's how that whole project started. But just like trying to make time so that like those sparks come. But sometimes the sparks don't come, and that's fine. And that's whatever your like dedication is gonna pull through, and you'll get what you need out of it. That's still.
It's great. It's great life advice, like almost advice to a younger you as well, even as you look forward. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time and kind of sharing these insights and some of these stories. I want to make sure that I can hopefully find as many of these references as I can to kind of show people so they can follow along. Because, right, we're talking so much about visual language and expression, and just for them to understand the detail, the aptitude, all of this stuff. So we'll make sure that we include everything in like show notes, put things wherever people can find them, because they really do need to see these examples in their life. But yes, thank you so much for this time.
Thank you. I'm just impressed, like, watching your transitions, like, between talking points. Like, it's all amazing. Like, thanks for starting this.
Of course. Well, I would love to also, like, as we continue to do this, I want to keep doing this monthly on like the podcast listeners club side of things. Like, it would be really cool as you continue to take on projects and kind of explore new things yourself. If like we can kind of link back up and share more, because right, share the wins. This is the year of sharing wins in 2025.
I've been wanting to for a while. I kept being told by people like you need to like record more behind the scenes. So I just need to like get myself to do it.